All right, we are live on YouTube at the Laws of Life talk show. How's everybody doing today, our live digital audience?
Woo! Yay!
Yay! And we have an incredible guest today. Her name is Suzanne Jewel. And Suzanne has an incredibly impressive background. So let me just tell you about who Suzanne is. Suzanne is an anxiety expert. She's a mindfulness thought leader. She is the host of Mindful Mornings Miami, a former global TV executive. Her life almost ended in 2017 with an aneurism, which really restarted her whole mindset. We're going to hear about that. Her dad's favorite poem is, "Today has been dawning another new day. Think, will you let it slip useless away?" And Suzanne's also a coach with Babson College's Women Innovating Now Lab, leads workshops at Miami Dade College, and teaches at Sacred Space. Please welcome Suzanne Jewel to Laws of Life Talk. All right. So Suzanne, that's a lot of stories. A lot of questions from that. I guess the first question is, tell us about your current show, on Mondays.
So I have Mindful Mornings Miami, which is a local radio show based here in Miami. It's an hour-long talk show that I've had the blessing and opportunity to interview people like Elizabeth Gilbert's Eat, Pray, Love, Deepak Chopra, presidential candidate Marianne Williamson. And each one of them, I get the opportunity to explore what it means to live, work, create, and play in a mindful way, because we see that word mindful used quite often, and really exploring what does it mean to be present in your life and how to actually live, work, create, and play. That, interestingly enough, the times we're living in now, what I call DC during coronavirus, is forcing all of us to be much more mindful and slow our roll and be present to the life that's here right now.
Interesting. So how long have you been hosting your show?
So my show actually started right before I got my unruptured aneurysm surprise in the fall of 2017. And it was part of my journey as a mindfulness teacher, is that I had a lot of curiosity of understanding what is meditation, what is mindfulness, what is spirituality, what is neuroscience, what is emotional intelligence, and how does all of that tie into this thing that Pierre Teilhard de Chardin calls that we are spiritual beings having a human experience.
Wow, yeah. That's incredible. And yeah. Live audience, feel free to raise your hand if you have a question for Suzanne, because we want you to participate in this conversation. Okay. So what inspired you to start your own show?
I actually am completely thankful to LinkedIn, because I was pinged at 1 a.m. in the morning. That'll tell you what my life was like, that I had LinkedIn open and that I had the notifications on. And I received a request from someone who said, and it was a fellow entrepreneur. It was a gentleman who years ago had started Who Go Fresh. Many of you may have gotten juices from Who Go Fresh in Miami Beach. And he said he was going to be on a radio show that day, and they asked him what music break he wanted to have. And he actually responded and said, "I think you need to have Suzanne Jewel on to actually lead a mindfulness practice instead of doing a music break." And I thought it was such an unusual request. I was like, that's really brave to do mindfulness meditation on the radio. So I said yes. After the show was done, I got a phone call from the producer about 2 weeks later. And he said, "Suzanne, I've got 2 guests here in the studio. My host is ill today. I loved your voice. Is there any chance you could come in and guest host a show?" From that, he then said, "I really like the way that you facilitate shows." And he said, "I really also like this idea of mindfulness. Would you be willing to take the show to an hour-long format?"
That's incredible. So now, where do we watch the show, Suzanne?
So I was in the middle of actually transferring the show from a live radio product, because it's on Jolt Radio, which is a local internet-based radio station, to podcast right when all of this happened. So I'm in the middle of actually editing 52 shows right now to put them onto podcast.
Wow.
In the midst of what's now occurred, I'm going to probably be taking the walk that you are, Blanca, which is I've got Yale psychiatrist Dr. Judson Brewer, who is an excellent expert in mindfulness and addiction. I've got calls out already to some of the guests I've had on before, and I'm probably going to re-interview some of them in this sort of a format and bring it online with a video element, and then probably also do some sort of audio only element. So coronavirus is going to shift even the way that I do the show.
So how has Corona inspired you to make that shift?
I'm fascinated that having the capacity to guide people in mindful meditation is like the best skill set you could have right now. I'm a former global corporate marketing strategy, communications, business development person that had worked launching AOL, DirecTV, Comedy Central, Playboy TV, all sorts of content around the planet and movie studio product. And I'm really stunned that I now have clients calling me and asking me to do meditation on demand for their teams. And I'm really struck that this time not only is calling for us to slow our roll at the individual level, but in the corporate world, I'm particularly inspired that I am seeing leadership learning to be empathetic. I'm seeing leadership learning to slow their roll and actually take well-being of their staff into account. And most importantly, I'm really happy to see leadership offering emotional intelligence resources, training, and tools to their team, because the truth is everyone right now is running around on high anxiety and our bodies are bathed in adrenaline right now.
100%. And do you find that adrenaline is, I mean, it can be physically debilitating, can't it?
It can be so physically debilitating that I can speak for it. When about now 6 years ago, I was living in Miami. I still had my strategy, marketing, communications business, and my work at that time was with the Gates Foundation in Ethiopia. My mom was dying of cancer up in Michigan, so my commute was Miami, Addis Ababa, and Grand Rapids, Michigan.
That's a hell of a commute.
Yeah.
Commute. And I was in that mode that many of us have been in for our lifetimes as a corporate executive. I lived on a plane 3 weeks out of the year. It was no surprise if I left Miami on the 1st and I might bounce to Buenos Aires and Tel Aviv and Paris and Tokyo, and I'd be back on the 21st or 22nd of the month. But I came to recognize that I was adrenaline addicted. Like I literally was addicted to always being on. And when my mother passed away, I started having panic attacks. And those panic attacks sent me into the emergency room. And if you've ever had one, it feels like having a heart attack on steroids. And eventually the doctor looked at me and said, there's nothing wrong with you. You basically have a completely dysregulated nervous system. And then my circadian rhythms from living on a plane and going to Africa and flying back, and sometimes I'd land from Miami and Frankfurt. My brother would call and say, Mom's back in the ER. Could you not go to Addis Ababa? Could you fly back to Detroit and Grand Rapids? So my whole nighttime, daytime, which is where our melatonin is, and also our rest and digest phases, were completely effed up. And that's what forced me, out of sheer exhaustion, to not only land on my knees and really put my faith where it belonged, which was not in me or my own willfulness, but it belonged in my heart, in a greater divine life force, whatever you want to call it. And also to put my butt on a cushion and really look at my patterns and say, you know what am I doing and why am I here? And when she did pass, she was my best friend. Her birthday was the 4th of September and mine is the 5th. And when she left the body, I really had a huge wake-up call to ask myself, all these gifts I have for communication and being able to impact people. When I open my mouth, people listen. I wasn't using them for good. And it became this huge journey for the last 6 years of becoming a certified heart math coach, a mindfulness trainer, and many of the other roles I play in the business world.
So let me
ask you a question.
You have a lot of different areas of expertise. You know, I've meditation, mindset. What do you think? Well, I have two questions. First, do you think that every human being is only blessed with one true gift? Let's start there. And secondly, what is your gift?
I don't know if I'm enough of a sage to answer that question appropriately. What I can quote to you is from the Gospel of Thomas that never made it into the Bible. And it says, if you reveal that which is inside of you, it shall save you. If you do not reveal that which is inside of you, it shall destroy you. And
Ooh.
I can vouch that my gifts are specifically to be a teacher. And it comes in this various packages of marketing and mindfulness and motivation and business. And I'm a very savvy entrepreneur. But at the bottom down low portion of it, I'm a teacher. And I was given a gift to communicate. And if I keep that to myself, then I know the day that I leave, someone's going to have a conversation with me and say, you missed your job.
Well, you know, a lot of people have asked me over the years, because I used to train a lot of the people in the company, hundreds of, you know, different people. And they used to say, aren't you afraid of giving away your secrets? And I would say, no, because everybody can benefit by using the same skills and strategies, and everyone's going to take that paintbrush and paint a completely different painting with the same piece of advice. So I feel I relate to that a lot. You know, that's brilliant that you see yourself as a teacher. So you think that's your the ability to teach and to convey knowledge is your greatest gift?
Yeah, really, I think underneath that would be communication. And because of this really interesting, I feel that my panic attacks brought me through a breakthrough and a breakdown to kind of break out, to wake up. I really feel I figured out that I'm like the David, and we all are, inside of the marble that Michelangelo saw. And what's been happening for the last 5 or 6 years is everything that was unnecessary has been chipped away. And what's supposed to actually be here is finally finding its way to be here and be of service.
So let me ask you, do you view this corona pandemic as a forced reawakening in all of us? How do you view it?
I'm first of all really grateful that as a human, I'm alive in this time. I'm really in awe that I have been given the opportunity to be here at an inflection point in human evolution. We are, as a species right now, being offered an opportunity to wake the F up. I also believe how we choose to respond or react. If anyone's read any positive psychology of Viktor Frankl and Man's Search for Meaning, here's stimulus. And by the way, he's a Holocaust survivor, so this was something he learned in the front lines. Here's a stimulus, and here is your response. The space in between what you do with it is where your freedom lies. So if he was looking at the Nazis and deciding whether or not he was next on the way to being cremated, and we too are in a circumstance of, am I next? Does coronavirus have my name on it? The ability to have chosen his choice of how he responded to that stimulus is what gave him, when you talk about mindset, the freedom. He chose not to be terrorized. He chose not to be owned by the fear that they chose to want to impel upon his mind. And he chose to be able to be present to the experience. He was not yet in the line. He did not make it to the actual cremator, and he actually survived. So I think that us being able to remember where we are, keep our eyes and our hearts open. We have got to tell the truth about what's happening.
Mm-hmm. I like
Yeah,
that.
these are fresh.
I think that's very important. And I mean, I think if I hear what you're really saying, which I'm also a proponent of, is how you choose to respond to a situation defines you. Now, do you agree with that?
It really does. And I will share with you, Blanca, one of the things I would tell you I'm really going to be a Zen bruiser about. I think it's an interesting thing. And I'll call myself that, which my mom would have said I was a sergeant about this. I also think this is a really important time for us to recognize we cannot spiritually bypass what's occurring. And if people don't know what spiritual bypassing is, it is a tendency to turn towards simple memes and social media kind of one-line sharings about what's going on. What's actually being asked of us right now as humans who are having, the spiritual being having a human experience, is to deepen our roots to what it actually means to be alive and to be awake, and not gloss over the fact that there is real suffering happening right now. And it is our time to spiritually mature and put on our big girl and big boy panties.
I agree with that spiritual maturity. I think that, ideally it will raise the consciousness of the human race. I mean, it's one of the few first times in the history of the universe that everyone literally in this universe is affected by the same problem. Sometimes there's the hurricane, and, I went to Panama City, and that town looked like it had been stripped by war after that Hurricane Michael last October. And meanwhile, the rest of the world is doing the same thing. Is living their life like there is no hurricane, or the tsunamis, or whatever parallels. This is the first time that literally the whole world has the same problem. So I agree, Sharon.
I have a question. So first of all, I agree 100%. When it first started, I realized very quickly, coming from, oh my God, we have no choice, we are a victim of this, we're at home, the kids are home, to realizing that there was a choice of how we choose to be with it. And my question is, I found a way to be with it to the point where I'm actually really enjoying this time off. It's the first time my son has been home since 4 years of college for this long. My daughter finally opened up her YouTube channel. I'm being very creative in writing songs. So there's a little bit of guilt that I feel like that I want to, I don't thank the coronavirus for coming, but I thank the way that, we've had to put a stop and to just be with what's really important. And you realize, all the fancy clothes, money, health, toilet paper, that's what's gold right now, so and of course, vitamin D and zinc and other things like that. But my question to you is, how do I completely eliminate the guilt that I feel for actually enjoying this time and finding ways to make it very, very creative?
Beautiful insights, by the way, first of all, that you're sharing, Sharon. Really lovely insights, that you're present to what it is. The other thing I think that's really important for us to recognize is that most of us on this call are highly privileged about how we are riding out this experience.
Yeah.
I think that having present time awareness and turning kind attention to the gifts and the gratitude. Wow, not only do I have a roof over my head, my refrigerator is full, I have air conditioning. If I really do need to get in the car and go try to find toilet paper, chances are I'm going to find toilet paper. I think one of the things that is interesting is that when guilt does arise, this is a very Buddhist perspective, it very often is because there might be something there that's calling your heart for you to actually take a look at. So when I say the idea that we need to really have our eyes open and recognize that there is a significant amount of suffering, one of the most interesting things about being spiritually mature is not only not glossing over what is difficult and what is truly happening, but is also to allow enough of our hearts to be open enough to break, to actually be with the fact that, wow, people are dying of this. And the people who are going to be hurt and harmed the most will be the people that in Las Vegas, for example, are being told to sleep in a parking lot and being created white squares on the cement about where they're allowed to sleep because the carpet that's being laid for them was considered to be potentially too infected or potentially capable of creating contagion. So having the courage to not turn away actually demonstrates a lot of groundedness. And then one of the things you can do if you are truly interested in turning this into a practice is there is something called Tonglen. And it means that you breathe in the difficulty of the world, you hold it in your heart. And when you breathe out, you actually try to offer peace in response to that. That practice, by the way, is a practice the Dalai Lama does every single morning. And he holds all of what it is that is difficult. He makes a commitment in his heart to try to stay present until all beings actually live well and live free, and then he exhales. We don't all have to become the Dalai Lama, but I do believe this time is offering us this chance to be really awake to how privileged we are. And then, like many of your callers or participants were saying, go do something for someone else.
Well, that's definitely true. That's why receiving the feedback of ideas on how can we help, because a lot of people are probably feeling that similar guilt, Sharon, and asking, how can we help? And then some people want to help, but they don't have the financial means to help. So what are the non-financial ways to help? Because some people don't have the dime, but they've got all the time in the world. Do you have any thoughts on non-monetary forms of support, either Suzanne or anybody in our live digital audience?
If you have the capacity to pray, giving someone a prayer is one of the most beautiful things that you can offer. And if someone is going through great difficulty, a really mindful thing to do is simply offer them your presence. Don't try to coach them. Don't try to fix them. Don't try to offer to them necessarily a different route than what they're taking. Just be present with them. Just let them talk through what it is that might be heavy upon their heart. There's a gorgeous practice in the Aboriginal Australian mythology and culture that's called Dadiri. And when someone has a particularly heavy heart, the community, like all of us here, would come together. And let's say it was my problem and I had to share, I would have the opportunity to speak, and I would have the opportunity to tell my story enough times that there's no air left in my story. And no one would judge me, and no one would try to fix me, and no one would try to coach me. They would let me take all the air out of my story until I literally had no more air left to offer.
And essentially, it's a life of not judging, just being for that other person. After you went through that massive shift, Suzanne, when you were obviously traveling all over the world as a global television production executive, was it when you went to the hospital and your body basically, in a way, subconsciously, as you put it, sort of spoke its message to you about how did your life change after that episode with your health?
There's nothing like the smell of death to wake you up to life. So I went into the hospital on the 12th of November of 2017. I had had a 3-day migraine, and I have enough of a mindfulness practice. Mindfulness is something you use to turn toward pain. I could tell that the pain was of a nature that it was so extreme. I could tell something was not at all right. Mm-hmm. And so when I went in and the doctor first did the CT scan, and mm-hmm. he noted that I had what he called bilateral dissections in my carotid arteries. And I looked at him because that sounded to me like my head should be on the floor and that I should be sitting there headless. It just sounded bizarre. Huh. And then they actually found out that I had an unruptured aneurysm in the back of my brain. And I lay in the stroke unit without having had a stroke for 5 days. Nothing happened. The aneurysm was so small, there was no need to operate. And after I got out, 2 things happened. One of them, when I went back to my home, I had this immense awareness when I walked into my door of my flowers and the smell of an orange, the first orange I ate. I felt like I was in love. And everything was bright and everything was joyful. And I was crying, like everything made me cry. And then 12 days later, my dad died. And I found myself having to ask for permission to get on a plane to fly to Grand Rapids, Michigan, where he had passed away and he had been the mayor of the city. And I found myself on the plane writing my dad's press release because he was the former mayor of the city. And I found this surreal experience of what really matters, Susie. What really matters? And I will tell you, for a woman who had her wings, that trip was November of 2017. I haven't been on a plane since. And what's changed is I've put my tush on a cush. I've gotten grounded, and I'm building a life based on rooting and creating community and not having to be out in the flash and the glam, which I was very good at. And I realized it wasn't it. That wasn't it.
So you went to within more than outside. You started visiting Suzanne more.
Bingo.
And loving Suzanne more. Because I know as an executive, you were probably, I mean, you were literally traveling all over the universe, servicing the needs of your business and never really paying attention to yourself.
You know, I won't deny I was pretty good at picking up really great places to go to a spa in Paris. I was pretty good at that kind, you know, like, yeah, I was good at that. But the idea of just coming home and putting some Epsom salts and some lavender oil in a little tub with my feet and warm before I went to bed, which to me is really, truly self-care and self-love.
Yeah.
Oh, I wasn't any good at that. Yes, I could go spend X amount of hundreds of dollars to have someone else do it, but actually take the time to slow my roll and do that for myself was a very different experience. And without being cliche at all, Whitney Houston sang, learning to love yourself is the greatest love of all. Because I will share also, when I finally slowed my roll enough, I found out there were a bunch of things about me I did not like. There were ways
What
that
didn't you like? Give me an example. What didn't you like? How could there be anything you don't like? You're pretty amazing.
I was highly capable of being really good at what I did. And I'll never forget when I was producing a Diane von Furstenberg fashion show. And my assistant, who used to work for me at Playboy TV International, was standing behind me with Diane, introducing her to my parents. And she was all excited to do this introduction. And she knew I was listening. And I was talking to the guy on my Qualcomm headset, calling the shots for what we needed to get ready for the show. And I was still listening to her. And I heard her very proudly say to my parents, "Your daughter's taught me everything I know about business. And when I grow up, I'm going to be just like her. She's a bitch on wheels." And I heard this, and like this record sound went, and I went, no, like that's not really who I am in here. Like, wow, it was this huge wake-up call that made me go, oh my God, I don't want that on my epitaph. I don't want that on my gravestone. You know, if anything, I want on my gravestone that I planted a lot of gardens for my grandma in Michigan and for my friend when I went to see him in Amsterdam, and like Suzanne planted flowers everywhere. Like, yes.
So you're a good gardener? That's one of your hobbies?
I am.
You know, I never could get into that hobby. I'm jealous that you're good at that. Maybe you can teach us that. Does anybody else in the audience garden? Sunny? Ashley?
Wow.
So you know what? I think we're going to have a show on the basics of gardening, because that's actually something we can do during this Corona. But in all seriousness, Suzanne, you're truly an inspiration. And it's been such an honor to have you as a guest. And I tell you, you're a true life philosopher. And we definitely want to have you back. You've taught us so much. And we're going to go ahead and give you a gift of song to thank you for being on our show today. We're going to have Sharon Leibovici Alcalay, our official singer of the Laws of Life and director of musical development, sing us a song. So what is on your mind, Sharon? What are you going to sing for us?
So it actually relates to what you questioned before, how we can do something for someone else that doesn't cost anything. And I really believe that reaching out to people in your life, people that you know that are alone, elderly people or people that don't have children at home or single people, that this quarantining is very social distancing and very lonely. And you can lend an ear, you can lend a heart, or you can lend a song. So I chose The Glory of Love song that I first heard it in Bette Midler's movie Beaches and fell in love with it. You've got to give a little, take a little, and let your poor heart break a little. That's the story of, that's the glory of love. You've got to laugh a little, cry a little, until the clouds roll by a little. That's the story of, that's the glory of love. As long as there's the two of us, we've got the world and all its charms. And when the world is through with us, we've got each other's arms. You've got to win a little, lose a little, and always have the blues a little. That's the story of, that's the glory of love. That's the story of, that's the glory of love.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
So beautiful, Sharon.
Blanca,
Amazing.
I would love, if we are allowed time-wise, I would love to have us all do one little mindful moment of a drop-in, because we've talked a lot about mindfulness, but we haven't actually practiced it. Could we do a really short practice?
If you guys up for it?
Sure.
All right, definitely.
All right, so I'm going to invite you to take what is called a dignified seat. So make sure that your shoulders roll back. You lift the heart cage and the rib cage just a little. Let your spine and your head kind of be in a rested position, but alert. And I'm going to invite you to close your eyes if that's available to you. And if not, just let your focus go to a 45-degree gaze and just soften. And I'm going to ask you to take your right hand and put it on your heart. Become aware of the beating of life in your body. Feel a sense of gratitude for the very first organ that beat as you became life. When was the last time you visited the cave of your heart? Take your left hand and also put it on your right hand now. Take a nice deep breath in through the nose. Feel the oxygen of life inside of you and exhale like a straw through your mouth, pursing your lips. Inhale again through the nose. Feel the life and the breath inside of you, letting out like a sigh. And quietly, for a moment, Know that you are right where you're supposed to be. You are here, now, breathing, present, alive, well. You are made for this moment. Your heart is hearty enough. We are here together in community because we've chosen to slow our roll, take a pocket to pause, and practice peace of heart and peace of mind. Pressing your palms together, pressing your thumbs up against the rib cage where your heart is, gently bow your mind to the power of your heart. As you flutter your eyes open and come back together, look at the beauty of the eyes of the women in this room and everyone who is present. Thank you for letting me explore, live, work, create, and play with you today in a very mindful way.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Suzanne. It was a true joy to have you on with us today. And everyone, thank you so much for being a part of it, for joining the community empowerment conversation. Stay safe. And this ends the Laws of Life Talk, but come back every Tuesday from 12 to 12:30 and be a part of it.